What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we got an Iron Maiden Top 10 brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter and patron of the channel, Evan David. Thank you, Evan David. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons who make this thing go. If you'd like to support us anyway, check out that Patreon link below or the Patreon link on the end screen. This channel could not exist without the patrons. All right, if you've never joined us before, I'm going to tell you up front, the music's not going to be in the video because it'll get blocked because of copyright. So just click on that Vimeo link below and you can watch along with us. That said, let's get into Evan David's research, right? And it's always extensive if you watch an Evan David reaction. He's going to tell us all about Iron Maiden. It's always informative. Even if you know everything about the band, you might learn something new here. Evan David says, rock and roll legend has it that the genesis of Iron Maiden can be traced back as far as Christmas Day 1975, when bassist Steve Harris first formed a band in East London, using that name after leaving his previous group known as Smiler. To quote Harris himself, quote, I was writing songs. I was really sort of getting pretty excited about the ideas I was coming up with. I didn't know where they were coming from, but I was just trying to sort of get more progressive influences in there. I was starting to write more and more, and I thought if they're not going to want to do me songs, I'd have to leave and form my own band. We didn't really have a name to start with. We couldn't think of one, so we didn't bother for a while we were rehearsing and stuff until we actually found a good name. And it was like, yeah, that's the one. Having thus settled on the name Iron Maiden, apparently being inspired to do so after seeing a film version of Alexandre Dumas' swashbuckling novel, The Man in the Iron Mask. I always wondered how that happened. Harris would remain as the core songwriter and musical centerpiece of the band to this day. But, and in stark contrast to this seeming stability, a veritable revolving door of fellow musicians would come and go around him during the first few years of the group, whose lineups would include, in fact, change at least 16 times in a 5-year interval between the band's first formation and the release of their self-titled first album in 1980. During the intervening years, however, Iron Maiden had nevertheless gone from strength to strength in terms of acquiring an increasingly passionate live following, first on the East London pub circuit, and then eventually being heralded as one of the spearheads of the burgeoning new wave of British heavy metal movement that was emerging at the time all over the UK in venues such as the grandly named Bandwagon Heavy Metal Soundhouse Club in London, which was run by one Neil Kay. In 1978, the band recorded what swiftly became a seminal 4-song demo tape, later dubbed the Soundhouse Tapes, at Spaceword Studios in Cambridge, with Harris later passing on a copy to Kay in hopes of getting more gigs, with Kay himself later recalling, quote, how this bloke called Steve Harris came into the Bandwagon. He came up to the stage and he said, hello, mate, we've recorded this demo. Would you give it a listen and maybe give it a play? And I said, oh, you and half the world, mate, you'll have to wait. At the end of the night, I pocket the tape and I go home. Suddenly I put on this cassette and I thought, blank, I won't say the word. This is really happening. Who the hell are these guys? Man, I was so rude to this bloke. He walks in the door, he's just got it. Steve and the boys eventually were invited to the Soundhouse to play live for the audience, and they didn't let us down. Delivered beautifully. They took the place by storm. You knew you'd been Maidened even then. Significantly, meanwhile, another copy of the Soundhouse tapes would soon find its way into the hands of budding manager Rod Smallwood, who was so impressed by what he heard that despite, or perhaps even because of, some chaotic incidents that occurred when he first tried to see the band perform live, one of which saw singer Paul Di'Anno briefly being arrested for carrying a knife, he swiftly agreed to become Iron Maiden's manager, and his galvanizing sense of professionalism would go on to serve the band well to this day, beginning first by releasing the Soundhouse tapes in limited numbers on their own ad hoc label, Rock Hard Records, and then swiftly following on by persuading EMI Records to sign the band to a major 3 and potentially 5-album deal in December of 1979. The first of these albums, the aforementioned self-titled Iron Maiden, would duly be released in 1980 and would reach number 4 in the UK album charts, following in the wake of the release of their first single, Running Free, 2 months earlier, whose chart success, reaching number 34 in the UK Top 40, would also see Iron Maiden become the first band to generally perform live on Top of the Pops since The Who had done it so over half a decade earlier. By this point, the group's ever-changing lineup had seemingly at least semi-stabilized to include Harris on bass, Clive Burr on drums, Paul Di'Anno on vocals, and Dave Murray and David Stratton on guitars. Although this fleeting impression of stability would swiftly be belied when Stratton left the band due to genuine musical differences shortly after the first album's release, to be replaced by one Adrian Smith. Just as, if not more significant in terms of the band's commercial future, however, was the fact that Iron Maiden had now also acquired the services of perhaps its most prominent member in the public eye, in the grotesque form of its undead mascot, Eddie, who had at first merely been a papier-mâché and later fiberglass mask, which oozed fake blood as part of the band's earliest onstage backdrops, but whose sheer eerie crowd appeal soon saw him become the undisputed public face of the band, featured on just about all the album's record covers and other related artwork from then on. As Rod Smallwood once stated, quote, "Steve's a very shy person, and the others were also pretty quiet. There was no, lunatic central figure, and I just thought we needed one. So designer Derek Riggs turned up with a load of science fiction book covers, which were completely not what we wanted. But right in the middle of all this was a picture of what was effectively the first album sleeve. It was Eddie. That was my boy. That was going to be the guy who roared for us and allowed the band to take a backseat to an extent, which they were delighted to do. They're not into being rock stars. Eddie became our conceptual continuity on the first single. We put him in the back of the alley with his face darkened, so you couldn't see who he was. So when the first album came out, it all made sense, and it went on from there." I just think that's really interesting to take a break here from Evan David's research, just that these guys did not want to be front and center. I mean, that's the exact polar opposite of what almost every other rock star has ever wanted to be. So I think that's pretty cool. All right, back on with the research. Even as Iron Maiden went on to release their second album, 1981 Killers, however, the increasingly extensive worldwide touring schedule adopted by the band proved to be just too much for singer Paul Di'Anno, who was suffering more and more from a toxic combination of substance abuse, vocal issues, largely caused by said substance abuse, and homesickness due to the pressures of all this relentless touring. As Steve Harris once recalled, quote, "The more success we're having, the more Paul couldn't deal with it, or didn't want to. I remember one particular gig in Germany, he was saying, 'I don't want to be here. I want to be home. I want to go home.' In the end, it was at a point where we thought, well, we can't carry on with him like this because it's just going to pull us all under." As it turned out, however, Iron Maiden would in fact uncover perhaps the most significant piece of its ever-shifting personnel jigsaw when former Samson vocalist Bruce Dickinson was recruited almost in plain sight to replace Di'Anno following a meeting with Smallwood at the 1981 Reading Festival, and quickly proved himself to be a significant upgrade in the eyes of most fans and critics alike, both in terms of his impressive vocal range as well as his sheer electrifying stage presence as one of, if not the most compelling frontman in all of rock and roll at the time. The seemingly unlimited potential for both commercial and creative success that had been unlocked by this new Maiden lineup soon became apparent with the release of their third groundbreaking album, The Number of the Beast, in 1982, which would go on to sell over 20 million copies worldwide, and of which Dickinson once aptly noted, when astrologers talk about a planetary lineup, this conjunction only happens once in a blue moon sort of thing. What you have in Number of the Beast is sort of this musical equivalent. Even before joining Maiden, I remember going, if I was singing for that band, we could really do something really, really cool. We could do something really, really different. It could go somewhere else if I was singing, and I don't think that a metal band has quite been there before. So began in earnest a monstrously epic rock and roll odyssey, which would soon see Iron Maiden record a further 14 studio albums to date, and in the process sell at least 130 million albums worldwide, as well as no less than 13 live albums to boot, at least two of which, 1985's Live After Death and 2001's Rock in Rio, must rank, in my mind, Evan David says, at least as perhaps the very best live albums recorded by any artist anywhere, which is perhaps not surprising when you consider the band have by now played over 2,500 concerts during their almost 5-decade career to date. Moreover, there will still be some intermittent further personnel changes during this time, including Nico McBrain replacing Clive Burr on drums in late 1982, Janet Gers replacing Adrian Smith on guitar in 1990, and above all, former Wolfsbane vocalist Blaze Bayley replacing a solo career-bound Bruce Dickinson in 1994. By the time both Dickinson and Smith had finally returned to the fold to record the excellent Brave New World album in 1999, Iron Maiden had at least emerged with a settled 6-person lineup of Dickinson, Harris, Murray, Smith, Gers, and McBrain, who has since endured to this day, even as their 7th member Eddie has meanwhile become even more ubiquitous, a worldwide presence to boot, appearing not only in the band's own promotional artwork as ever, but amongst other places in video games, comic books, on Royal Mail postage stamps, and even on the label of Iron Maiden's own officially endorsed Trooper beer. All in all, therefore, Iron Maiden has thus become one of the most legendary, iconic bands, not only in heavy metal history, but in popular music, full stop. And as someone who has loved this band's horrifically exciting career ever since first hearing a school friend's double cassette of Live After Death playing on a coach trip to France in my teens, I hope you'll enjoy all the suitably spooky Iron Maiden top 10 as we approach Halloween while I'm filming this. And while I was acutely aware that not everyone will agree with all the choices on my list, which is, as ever, is a mix of big hits and personal favorites, which should not be seen as in any way definitive, but treated rather as a starting point for discussion, especially since several fan favorite Maiden tracks have sadly been left out due to either overall length issues, the fact that the guys at RTC have already reacted to them before in other videos, or in some cases both. Now, I'll clarify. We have a rule usually for the patrons of 60 minutes or less on the music. So that's what we're talking about. As far as not reacting to something we reacted before, that's an Evan David thing. I definitely encourage, if you're bringing a top 10, to bring the songs you feel are the best. But Evan David prefers to do it that way. I get it. I hope you will nevertheless all join me in celebrating the work of a band who by now have more than fulfilled Steve Harris's founding vision way back when of a, quote, a rock band that would make great albums, put on superb live concerts, and never ever sell out. And until then, remember to scream for me, RTC. Just another quick reminder, music's not in here, videos aren't on here, but they're in the Vimeo link below. I love the lyrics up somewhat, but we're going to watch 8 of these 10 songs. We're going to watch videos, so it's kind of more about the performance. I don't know a ton of stuff by Iron Maiden. I've never listened to an Iron Maiden album, no particular reason. Just never really hit for me, the little stuff that I heard. I've been proven time and time again on this channel that when I haven't listened to somebody, how great they are. It's just one of those things. But I mean, I listen to a lot of music now and do a lot of videos. I don't really have time to listen to a lot of stuff outside of what I do for this channel. But looking forward to this. We haven't reacted to much Iron Maiden, right? A few things here and there, but when you react to so much stuff, you really don't remember a lot of it anyway. An album and stuff I'll remember because there's continuity. But if a song appears in a top 10 list, we do a random like song reaction, or we have song battles where we battle 2 songs. We have over 350 of those up on the channel. You're not really going to remember those. So most of this is going to be brand new for me, believe it or not. So looking forward to it. So let's start out, fittingly enough, with Iron Maiden. Evan David says, first released as the title track of the band's first studio album in April of 1980, this belligerently simple yet anthemic tune serves to aptly sum up just what the band and its music are all about in suitably uncompromising fashion, and has moreover served as one of the most eagerly awaited closing songs to pretty much every Iron Maiden gig ever since to this day. And as such, I'd like you guys to react to this clip of the song being performed live at Long Beach Arena, Southern California in March of 1985. The concert, which would later form the core of Maiden's legendary Live After Death live album. All right. Thanks again, Evan David. Let's do this. All right, Iron Maiden. Really good energy. Bruce, very charismatic, right? Musicianship, fantastic. Bass work, obviously the guitar work, drumming. Just really, really good. High energy. The problem with a live performance a lot of times with music like that, you can understand about 30% of what Bruce was saying, but it's not really about that. It's about the energy. But the guitars drown out the lyrics and the vocals, right? I mean, I have that problem when I go to live concerts. Last year, a couple concerts I went to, Johnny Marr was opening up for the Killers. Johnny's guitar was turned up so loud, I never could hear a word Johnny was saying, right? And then I took my daughter to see My Chemical Romance. And for any songs that were really upbeat, you could not hear the vocals. So it's just one of those things. But this is more about the energy, the ambiance, the musicianship. Really, really good opener. Next up at number 9, you see it below, Fear of the Dark. First released as the title track of the band's 9th studio album in 1992. Later reaching number 8 in the UK when a live version was released as a single almost a year later. This wickedly spooky and macabre tune, which was once described by its writer Steve Harris as evoking the sensation of, quote, being afraid, but not knowing exactly what of, simply had to be included on this list, Evan David says, given that as of this writing, Halloween season is looming large once again. Not least because it too has become another sinister staple of their live act ever since, and as such, I'd like you guys to react to this clip of the song being performed live in front of about 250,000 people at the fantastic Rock in Rio Festival in Brazil in January of 2001. All right, Fear of the Dark. What a fantastic performance. You know, I talked about it on the last performance, which we're talking in the 80s, how you couldn't really hear Bruce's vocals. This is a whole different ballgame, right? We fast forward to 2001. 250,000 people, lots of money for production. Bruce sounded fantastic, flawless. All the boys were flawless, right? That is just a fantastic live performance. And to control the crowd that way. I love the build of the song. I love the outro of the song, how we dialed it back in. It has got to be, I can't imagine more of an adrenaline rush. And to stand up there as those guys, especially with Bruce having control of talking to them and singing to them, of the adrenaline rush that's got to be on the stage. I mean, Bruce had so much energy and just commanded the crowd, but like, it just has got to be an unbelievable feeling to look out on that and just feel that energy coming back at you, man. But that was great. And next up, we have Wrathchild. First released as part of the band's second studio album, Killers, in February 1981. Evan David says, I want to include at least one tune from the Paul Di'Anno-led era of Iron Maiden on this list, as I was interested in seeing how you'd compare and contrast it to the perhaps more familiar Bruce Dickinson-led lineups that you've seen so far. But like I told you, I don't remember much of that. And by common consent, this menacingly aggressive tune, which wouldn't be out of place in a horror sci-fi tinged spaghetti westerns, by far one of the most enduring tunes to emerge from that era of the band, with Iron Maiden expert Steve Pilkington, for one, remarking that with this tale of a, quote, vengeful protagonist hunting down the father who abandoned him, Maiden made it quite clear to anyone listening that they had upped their game from spirited rockers full of youthful energy to serious metal force. Evan Davis says, a verdict which will hopefully be amply confirmed as you please react to this clip of the song being performed live at the Rainbow Theatre in London in December of 1980. All right, Wrathchild or Wrathchild, however you want to pronounce it. This is where these lists get tricky, especially with Evan Davis, because he includes a lot of live performances. And so then it really doesn't become about the music, because you can't really separate the live performance from the music. So it's hard for me to say, right? Is this really better than Fear of the Dark, the previous song? I mean, watching the visual performances, heck no, but it's not really apples to apples, right? That's no shade at Paul. Bruce is just fantastic. But also, this is very early Maiden, and when we watch Fear of the Dark, it's 20 years and probably 1,000 shows later, like your confidence, your equipment, your everything is just going to be so much better. But it skews my view of the song too, because if I was just listening to the songs through headphones, I could give you a better idea of what I would rank. But I mean, still a good effort and cool seeing him early on. And once again, I will point out the guitar work is fantastic. So we have Murders in the Rue Morgue. Once again, first released as part of Killers in February 1981. This eerily atmospheric tune with its title, if not its plot, taken from Edgar Allan Poe's pioneering early detective story of the same name, is a prime example of the sheer musical ambition that was a key feature of Iron Maiden's output, even at this stage, with Paul Di'Anno's punk-style vocal aggression merging seamlessly with Steve Harris's more literary prog rock-inspired leanings to create a twisted musical murder mystery that has long been one of my personal favorite Iron Maiden tracks. Hence its place on my list. This is one of the two songs that we're not watching a video for. Murders in the Rue Morgue. The story is great. The writing on this one is great. I thought the energy was really good. I definitely enjoyed that one. The story goes, this guy's in France. He doesn't speak French. He finds these girls dead, and he doesn't speak the language. He's got blood on his hands, so everybody thinks he did it. And then he runs away, and he's always running away. At the very end, his doctor tells him he's done this before. So, he's probably not of his right mind. He probably murdered those girls, and now he's figuring that. So really well done and very catchy. And really liked it. And next up, if you're scoring along at home, we're up to number 6. The Prisoner, first released as part of the band's third studio album, The Number of the Beast, in March 1982. This rousing revolutionary ode to personal freedom against a ruthlessly oppressive authoritarian regime is this time inspired by the 1960s Brit cult TV series of the same name, created and starring Patrick McGoohan, and is another of my own personal favorite Maiden tunes, with Bruce Dickinson describing the circumstances behind its creation as follows, quote, when I was a kid, I used to watch this series, The Prisoner, and I wondered what on earth it was trying to say, because when I was a kid, I didn't feel as if I really had anywhere that I belonged. So when the prisoner turns around and says, I'm not a number, I'm a free man, I want that to be me. The Prisoner started off as a track in a rehearsal room in Hackney. The drummer, Clive Burr, wasn't there. He was having a cup of tea. So being a frustrated drummer, I started bashing out this pretty dead simple drum beat at the beginning, and then I think Adrian started playing this riff, then Steve came in and went, what a great riff. Then we started, obviously, we wanted to be really dramatic with the intro, so we thought maybe we could snip into the tape off the Prisoner TV series. Anyway, Rod calls Patrick up, Patrick McGoohan, the actor, quotes the line, gets it completely wrong, and I'm going, no, he'll tell you to piss off in a minute. You've got the words all wrong, he'll freak out. Then McGoohan just says, do it, and that was it. Top man. Evan David wants us to react to the song being performed live, intro and all, at the Hammersmith Odeon. Later, the Hammersmith Apollo in London in March of 1982. Boys and girls, I'm not a number. I'm a free man. The Prisoner. Bruce absolutely slaying the vocals on that. But I'll tell you what, man, I'm a broken record on this, so to speak, but the musicianship is top notch. It's kind of at a different level than a lot of bands at this time, right, who are kind of in the same, quote, genre. Just fantastic guitar drumming. And like I said, Bruce's control of the audience, even at this time in 1985, is just next level, man. Really good song as well. I can only imagine the energy you would feel at a Maiden concert, especially back then. All right, we're at the top half of the list. Number 5, The Number of the Beast, a song I will tell you I've heard one time. Once again, first released as a title track of the Number of the Beast album in March of 1982, reaching number 18 in the UK singles chart upon its release as a single a month or so later. This weirdly compelling tune about a hapless observer unwillingly trapped after accidentally viewing a seemingly occult ceremony was originally inspired by a nightmare Steve Harris had after he'd fallen asleep one day watching the second Omen movie, with Harris himself later explaining how, quote, the Beast wasn't really a concept album. It was just a song that I wrote and we decided to call it that. I've had a lot of nightmares over the years, and that was one of them. And it was just a little twist at the end where you're not supposed to be sure what's real and what's not. The poem Tam O'Shanter, which I did at school, had stuck in my mind over the years. And it was a bit like that, being sort of chased through the forest and stuff like that. Certainly the nightmarish horrors, Evan David says, evoked by Number of the Beast would prove to be far too much for some Christian groups in the U.S. in particular, who accused both the song and Iron Maiden as a whole of dabbling in Satanism. And as a result, but the band members themselves, one of whom, the band's then future drummer, Nico McBrain, would later himself become a born-again Christian, no less, have long insisted ever since that they were in fact doing no such thing, and that the devilish imagery used in the song is merely a macabre echo of the kinds of B-list horror movies that inspired it, with Steve Pilkington, for one, pointing out that the song also sees Bruce Dickinson's best vocal performance so far, relating a cautionary tale of a black magic ceremony, which he happened to witness to his horror, with a scream to rival even Roger Daltrey of The Who's legendary Won't Get Fooled Again eruption. Blood-curdling stuff indeed. A point will hopefully become evident when you please react to the song's official video. And, I'm a Christian, and if you watch this channel, you know that, but these Christian groups that go insane over stuff that they really have no idea what they're talking about. They probably never even heard the song. It's just not really what Christianity is about, but these people are out here representing the quote faith. All right, the Number of the Beast. What an energetic performance once again. The imagery, most of that is not any sort of satanic monsters. The monsters that we know, the ballroom dancers coming out with the 6 and the 6, and we had to say, the numerology of probably repeating 666. I could see where radical Christian groups might have a little bit of issue with that, but really good song, really good energy. It's a broken record, but it's true. Bruce's power, in that scream was incredible. Really, just the way he can turn up in certain parts whenever he wants. He can sing with restraint and sound good, and then he can turn it up into the almost scream. Not the literal scream, but the almost scream, and still sound really good. Usually singers in this genre cannot do that, but once again, the guitar work, the drumming, top notch. Let's go on to number 4. All right, we got 4 songs left. You see it below. The Trooper, first released as part of the band's fourth studio album, Peace of Mind, in May of 1983, reaching number 12 on the UK singles chart, as well as number 28 on the US mainstream rock chart, when it was released as a single a month or so later. The sadly forever timely tune is a no-holds-barred depiction of both the brutal, visceral excitement, as well as the often horrendously futile waste of life that remains inescapable aspects of warfare to this day, with specific inspiration being drawn from the notoriously blundered charge of the Light Brigade during the Crimean War in 1854, when over 600 British cavalrymen were mistakenly sent to their doom, when rather than preventing the Russians from withdrawing some recently captured British guns from the battlefield as had been intended, they were instead ordered to attack a full detachment of Russian cannons on another part of the battlefield, which unsurprisingly soon tore most of their recklessly brave attackers to bloody shreds, an incident which also had inspired Alfred Lord Tennyson's famous contemporary poem about the charge, which Bruce Dickinson quotes at the beginning of the barnstorming clip of the song performed. We're going to go back to that live 2001 Rock in Rio festival. All right, The Trooper. Once again, the energy, especially at this concert with 250,000 people, there's fantastic. But one of the things I liked is Bruce went up above on the scaffolding, right? And he's up there with the flag and doing his thing, but he let everybody else, all the guitarists are standing there in the center stage, right? Taking center stage. And that's really the sign of an unselfish front man, just letting them take center stage. So that was really cool. And, of course, the story of the song is fantastic as well. Next up at number 3, we got Flight of Icarus. First released as a single in April of 1983, reaching number 11 on the UK singles chart, as well as a career best number 8 on the US top album tracks chart. And later released as part of Peace of Mind, once again a month or so later. The soaring tune takes its subject matter from Greek mythology, this time retelling the ancient tale of Icarus, young son of arch-inventor Daedalus. Think of the latter as the ancient Greek equivalent of Marvel's Tony Stark, who alongside his father sought to escape otherwise inescapable activity on the island of Crete by fashioning 2 pairs of gloriously intricate human-sized wings, but who in Icarus's case sadly flew far too high and thus went far too close to the sun, so that the wax holding his wings together melted and he plummeted like a stone to the unforgiving ocean below, drowning as a result. In Iron Maiden's capable hands, however, this oft-told tale becomes perhaps less of a stern cautionary sermon about the dangers of youthful recklessness, more of a defiant evocation of the brash daredevil spirit that drove Icarus to take such foolhardy chances in the first place. And as such, has long been one of my personal favorite Iron Maiden songs to boot, Evan David says. We are going to look at this song being performed live at the Long Beach Arena in 1985, like our first track, Iron Maiden, was. All right, Flight of Icarus, masterful work being done on the guitar right there, right? That's a masterclass in it. Really good song. I'm going to go back and listen to the actual studio version of this song later on because it was really heard by the muted like audio on this. Like the audio is not great, and I could tell that the guitars, even though they popped in the drumming and Bruce's voice, would have been much more magnified without just kind of this 1985 recording where it just doesn't really feel that power. Still really good song and great performance. Coming in at number 2, we got Aces High. Evan Davis says, first released as part of the band's 5th studio album, Power Slave, in September 1984, reaching number 20 in the UK singles chart when released as a single a month or so later. This is another evocation of the ecstatically risky joys of manned flight. In this case, given added urgency by the sheer significance of its historical subject matter, being inspired by the deadly airborne duels between the RAF and the Germans that did so much to win the vital Battle of Britain for the Allied cause during the darkest days of World War II. As Dickinson himself later put it, there is so much great stuff and so many great stories throughout history that you can make parallels with the modern day, particularly when history repeats itself as often as it does, that it makes for some very colorful subject matter. The way I look at it is that if you're going to plunder something for the lyrical basis of a song, then at least plunder something that has really happened rather than invent some crass sword and dorkery epic, you know? Indeed, this is an approach which has served Iron Maiden very well, Evan David says, over all these many years and never been better than on this occasion with Dickinson's perilously powerful vocals, both dovetailing well with the relentlessly sweeping, soaring twists and turns of the rest of the band's instrumental background, while also demonstrating for all to hear just why Bruce had already been given the aptly named, befitting nickname of the human air raid siren to boot. The song becomes particularly powerful in turn when prefaced by an excerpt from Winston Churchill's famous "We Shall Fight on the Beach" speech, as is usually the case both live and in the song's official video, which we're going to watch right here. All right, Aces High, wonderfully done video. I thought it really told the story in some quick succession there on the video cut-ins and great energy. I mean, that song went hard, right? I mean, the guitar work and drum, man, that's fantastic, man. Super enjoy that. You know, it is different being in America. Obviously, I wasn't alive during World War II, but, you know, I used to be a history teacher way, way, way back in another time and another place. And, you know, when you study World War II, obviously the United States was attacked in Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. And I mean, you know, that was a tragic event, but it was definitely different from America, where we lost tons of people, but it was a war fought on other soil. Whereas, like, you know, I can't imagine all the bombings and just sitting there in the UK and just waiting in Britain for those bombings to come in London and letting them just come after, you know, and you see some of that there. And, you know, it'd be a whole nother world because you were actually under attack. It was a little different ballgame here for the United States, but thought it did a fantastic job. And if you're going to tell this story, man, it needs to come in hard, right? Like that, right? So great. All right, now drum roll, please. Number 1 on Evan David's top 10 Iron Maiden songs. You see it below, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Once again, first released as part of Power Slave, this is the ultimate epic Iron Maiden tune to end all epic Iron Maiden tunes. And while it is technically no longer Iron Maiden's lengthiest song, having finally been pipped to the post by 2015's Empire of the Clouds, which lasts for a truly staggering 18 minutes, this monstrously ambitious and spellbinding reworking of 18th century English romantic poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge's own creative masterwork about the trials and tribulations of a uniquely cursed seafarer has since been hailed by band members Steve Harris, Dave Murray, and Bruce Dickinson as their favorite Iron Maiden song to play live. As Steve Pilkington once again puts it, quote, "A schoolboy could practically write an essay on the original work simply by listening to this. There are many contenders for the greatest Maiden song, and all have their meritorious claims, but there can be no discussion of that subject without this masterpiece at least being thrown into the mix." Okay, Evan David knows this song's 13 minutes, 39 seconds long. We're going to listen to the audio and not the video because Evan David thought it'd be easier to hear the lyrics, as I've pointed out before in a couple of these performances. I am not a fan of long songs at all. However, Iron Maiden has definitely showed themselves to be outstanding so far, so I know they're not going to let me down. Number 1, let's go. Rime of the Ancient Mariner, coming in at number 1 on Evan David's top 10 Iron Maiden songs, a fitting number 1 for sure. I know you guys probably want to know what I think of the length of the song. I still think it could have been a little bit shorter, but if you've known this song for years, I'm sure you're looking at me going, "You're crazy, Sean. It is perfect just how it is." Bruce said it was the closest thing to a symphony that Iron Maiden would ever get. And I get that in there. I mean, just absolutely peak musicianship. Bruce Drawsher, and the story is epic. I'm not going to go into it, but it's epic. It's really good songwriting as well. That is going to take me to my favorite tracks. But before I get to those, we've got to get Evan David's honorable mention, which I'm going to go through super quick because there's a ton of them as always. We got Sanctuary, Children of the Damned, Revelations, Wasted Years, Hooks in You, Be Quick or Be Dead, Man on the Edge, Brave New World, Blood Brothers, New Frontier, Passchendaele, El Dorado, Speed of Light, Death or Glory, and especially Running Free, Live After Death version, Phantom of the Opera, Run to the Hills, Hallowed By, Be Thy Name, Die With Your Boots On, 2 Minutes to Midnight, Power Slave, Can I Play With Madness, The Evil That Men Do, and the Wicker Man Rock in Rio version, many of which were only excluded from my list due to overall length issues and because, as you mentioned earlier, we've already reacted to them in the past. I also highly recommend both the Live After Death and Rock in Rio live albums in their entirety, so I can see that. My faves, honorable mentions, the first track, Iron Maiden, and The Prisoner. Faves are going to be Fear of the Dark, Aces High, and The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So when we came into this list, I told you I didn't know a lot of Maiden. This really gave me, just a little primer to it. Super enjoyed it. I thought standouts for me, the musicianship was fantastic. The Bruce tunes, and I know we had two that weren't Bruce tunes, but the Bruce tunes, the power in his voice, but the control of his voice and the crispness of his voice are fantastic, right? A step above anybody else in the genre for me, but just fantastic. So guys, let me know what your favorite Maiden tracks are below. Super enjoyed this one. Evan David, give him some kudos for putting it together. And if you don't agree with this list, remember his things that if we'd reacted to it or if it was too long and it didn't fit in there with so many albums and so many great songs. It's really hard to put these top 10s together. But if you haven't already, guys, give this a thumbs up. I super appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button. We got over 2,500 videos. And until next time, guys, I will see you.